Welcome back to Fresh Economic Thinking. You're with Cameron Murray. Special guests today, Paul Frieders and Sienna Baker. They're starting a new academy in Belgium for minds that dare. Let's dig in. I've written about this academy before at Fresh Economic Thinking. Welcome, Paul. Welcome, Sienna.
Great to see you again, Cameron.
You've written a book about your experience building an academy in Belgium, a new sort of college. It's called Minds That Dare. Who's this book for? What are you trying to achieve with it? Who would like to start?
I mean, Paul, you've written the takeaways, so I'm happy to let you answer this one if you like.
Okay, sure. So the primary audience would be parents of young adults, seeing, what the best is for them. But we're also trying to inspire other academics, other thinkers, even priests, artists, and other people who are serious about new education. So we'd like to see many more new academies pop up, of course, including in Australia. Maybe something for you, Cameron.
We will talk after I turn off the recording. So that's right. I've read the book, so thank you both. And it's very interesting because I know you both and I know all the characters in this story, but seeing the trials and tribulations unfold of the people, the experimentation, before I really want to dig into how the whole vision evolved, but I probably need to start with why. And probably people will think, who are these crazy people thinking they're starting a new academy? What's wrong with all the fancy academies? And Paul, you've worked at fancy universities, and Sienna, you've attended fancy universities. Maybe Sienna, we should start. Did you share the vision? Did you have a frustration from your perspective? Where's the value to this exercise?
Yeah, it is a good question for people who are like, yeah, what's kind of the unique offerings of this new academy when you have a lot of different and independent sort of private similar academies, but like I mean, the thing that I think is the two things I suppose that I think are most significant about this particular, sorry, my cat's scratching the door. I'll let her in. The two things I think are probably most significant are one, the fact that the content, like, so one about is about the academic program. The content is integrated across disciplines, which you just don't get even in like new independent, whatever have you. You just don't get that in mainstream universities and academies. And the other is the fact that everybody kind of lives together. Everybody very much lives together in the same on the same campus, and it's sort of similar to a dormitory, I suppose. In some ways, you could draw that comparison, but it really is communal. Everything is communal eating. With everybody else, it's communal living, working, working on the grounds, all that kind of stuff. So these are things that you just don't get offered to you by modern universities. I'd say those are the things that come to mind to me immediately. I mean, I could go on, of course, but not
Well,
sure how
while
long you
I've
want the answer to be.
while I've got you, you shared in the book, Minds That Dare, a lot of frustrations of your experience of the content and hmm, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
That's all right.
The
Go for it.
the lack of deep thinking and the superficial avoidance of controversial topics. Is that a thing that you
Yeah.
experienced? And where were you
Yeah.
studying? Uh, and
Yeah, I I was studying in Sydney. That definitely was a big problem for me. It was kind of boring. It was very predictable. There was a lot of that kind of, okay, we're going to get into something that's controversial, but it's not really controversial. Everybody kind of has a preset opinion about what it's going to, whatever they're talking about. There aren't really you can't really bring any like new ideas really to the classroom, to the seminars, to the tutorials. It's sort of like you have to pretend to be controversial by basically trying to slot yourself in somewhere to what the mainstream already thinks. Um,
mm,
and yeah, and this was sort of in like I did a double degree, so I didn't finish one of them. I didn't finish my social work or my psychology degree. I did my creative writing history degree, so I had a separate degree in that which I finished. And it's not only in the humanities where this problem occurred, like it's also in the fine arts, like it's everywhere, really. Um,
Mm.
Less so in certain disciplines, certain faculties, but still, yeah, it's sort of the people are not they're not really stimulated to think about things in a new way. It's just not, yeah, it's yeah, it's not very it's very predictable after a while. Doesn't It's not very stimulating. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. So before I get Paul's perspective as an academic in this environment, um, would you say other students shared your frustrations? I remember when I was studying, we'd go and have beers at the campus bar and just riff about all the nonsense. Uh, Probably wasn't quite the same 20 plus years ago. Um, but do you think your views are shared, or are you the minority? Do most people just plug along and go, "Oh yeah, let's not touch any sensitive topics here"? And
It's
um,
difficult to know. I mean, as I say in the book as well, I didn't really make many friends because I didn't really like many of the people there. So I never really got to talking with most of them about what they might have thought. Well, yeah, I did a few times have an opportunity to talk with one of them, you know, more deeply, you might say, about something, but I was basically always disappointed by what they had to offer, which was usually nothing that was different from what they were kind of being taught, and they were sort of regurgitating that. I think there might be a gender thing. I hate to say this and put myself on the spot immediately. But I think probably like there were a lot of women in the degrees that I was taking because psychology and social work are female
mm,
dominated disciplines. And I think you get a little bit more of the, as you described with your kind of friends, like going off and talking about, oh, wasn't that just, ridiculous? I think you get a little bit more of that with men
uh-huh,
at this age than you do with women. Women are generally less likely, in my experience, to dissent in that way. Not even,
uh-huh.
it's not really dissent because it's not, but you know what I mean. They're less likely to have those kinds of thoughts and conversations I've personally found. So, yeah.
Very, very interesting. So some frustrations about sort of superficial, can't really get into the
Mhm.
deep questions if they're slightly controversial. You hear that a lot. So I'm always very skeptical of what I hear online. So it's nice to have a real human here telling me their experience. And so, Paul, you're on the other side of this in academia. You've been a professor for a long time of economics. Why would you give that up and try and start a sort of crazy educational experiment in a castle in Belgium? Why? Tell me.
Um, well, I like adventures, Cameron, and to a certain extent, I saw no way through in the existing institutions, right? And I've taught in Canberra, in Melbourne, in Brisbane, in London, Saudi Arabia, the Netherlands, and various other places. And it's everywhere the same. Bureaucracy makes it practically impossible for the academics to be a group of teachers looking after the students. So each of the academics then does their own thing, and some of them are brave and get into trouble. Because of course some students don't like to be pushed or to have controversial ideas, and they will complain, and then the bureaucracy will come down on the academics. But more fundamentally, the teachers are sort of prevented from really looking after their students. They're no longer in charge of these universities, and they're just going through the motions. So there's no soul in the teaching either from the academic perspective, right? They show up, they get a nice salary. If you're good at research, you can have a high status and flow around, but you basically don't really make a change in the lives of the students. You can individually do what you can, but as a group, basically it's disengaged, right? It's very transactional. It's you hardly interact at all, and so the experiences which you and I had 20 years ago, further
Mm,
in my case, whereby you really interact with the academics, you have beers with them, and you can sort of say anything really without worry about being ratted out or sort of somebody getting immediately upset or that there are huge sensitivities. So those days are practically gone, practically everywhere. And also the student body now has more problems than they had 20 to 30 years ago. I really think that social media, the internet, mobile phones have made life tougher. right? Made life tougher for young people. They feel under pressure of each other, the things that are said about them on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, wherever they are. That makes them mindful of anything they say. So they're sort of on edge and sort of in performance mode all the time. And so many don't show up for the lectures. They watch online if at all. Then they do an exam, and the bureaucracy forces you to have very boring exams, which are basically memory tests, but not really tests of understanding, because that always has a subjective element to them. And so somebody might complain. And so,
Mm.
well, we can't have that, can we now? So to an extent, the whole thing has become a soulless performance. Um, and there were problems already 20 to 30 years ago, but now they're no longer universities. They're kind of like compliance teaching places. And you can see the logic of this from the bureaucratic point of view. You know, that is safe. They've got a reputation, they make money. The students don't complain too much because you don't want to complain about your own degree. But the soul has gone out of it. And that's been true for a long time. We thought, okay, we're going to do something about it.
So it still seems to work for a lot of people. I mean, to offer the alternative, people seem to go into university, they pop out, the lawyers seem to roughly know what the law is and be able to function. The engineers seem to be able to make sure what they design doesn't fall
Mhm.
down. Um, in the humanities, who knows? The economists, I don't know. The economists are a strange bunch, but like it seems to work for people. So how would you know? I guess what is it we're looking at when we say it's not really working, the soul's gone out of it? Like, say I've graduated, or Sienna, did you feel like you just wasted years? Your brain was just like getting soft. I know, Paul, your big thing is the brain is a muscle, you've got to work it out. Sienna, did you think your brain was getting soft in these courses?
What a strange question.
Mm,
Good question though. Like I learned interesting things. I mean, it wasn't necessarily like the thing is with like most university courses, you'll still get something out of it in terms of you'll learn like a factoid that you didn't know before. Like there'll be things in the knowledge that you didn't know before. Like you will learn things. Um, but I never ended up, it's obvious I've kind of flopped around and then not finished a couple of degrees now. And it's kind of because I either didn't feel like what I was being told would actually benefit what I wanted to do. So this is particularly true in psychology, where I started out wanting to be a clinical psychologist, which is just kind of like a counseling type thing. But you need to do all of the courses which require you to know, stuff that you would only need to know if you were going to be a what's the other type, like a research kind of
mm,
psychologist, like working in labs and things like that. And some of that is useful, but there was kind of like I was sort of like I don't know what the relevance is going to be with this knowledge to what I'm going to do, and it's
mm,
so untransferable knowledge to anything else that it's sort of
mm.
like why am I learning this? Um, and then social work, it was more just like the social justice stuff that got really just too extreme for me. And I kind of got sick of it. And that definitely was more of what you describe with sort of my brain is going soft, if you like that phrasing. But, um, but yeah, there's the non-transferability of skills and knowledge. It's not that you don't learn anything, but you don't get much breadth. Kind of what Paul talks about in terms of like knowledge tribes. I see a little bit of that, especially in the more sciencey type disciplines, like the psychology. You get a lot of the science stuff. Um, so yeah, a few problems like that, if
Yeah,
I were to
right.
sum.
So I think we all share similar frustrations. Probably now's the time to tell the audience that we all know each other. Paul was actually my PhD supervisor, so I've experienced this soulful education before. And from what I hear from others who've done their PhDs, a very different experience with Paul. We would literally sit side by side with each other on the computer and type stuff and bounce off sentences and argue about stuff at our morning coffees and for a range of topics, but also the tasks that need to be done. So definitely he's the right man for the job. Sienna is Gigi's daughter. Gigi's also part of the Academia Libera Mentis grand experiment. and future daughter-in-law of Paul. Is that right? So
Yeah,
we're all friends here. I think the listeners should know that you're not going to get an objective grilling of these two because we share a lot of similar backgrounds. But with that in mind, let's move on to the grand experiment and how it's different. Paul, you had enough, so you bought a castle in Belgium. What's happened since then? How have you tried to create this better environment for learning, and how does it differ? Wherever you want to start with the big.
My God, I mean, you're asking me to describe the mountain, where we're on it, and where we are yet to go, right?
What does it
So
look
how
like
did
from
we
a
start?
distance for someone who's never heard
Yeah,
about
yeah,
it? I
yeah,
guess maybe let's
yeah.
start there.
So the frustration had been building for many years, and including, Gigi was also frustrated, and many academics. And we sort of finally decided, okay, let's do it. And so I pitched this at a certain moment to Erica, my wife, and I basically told her, look, should we spend our life savings on a place in another country where our own families, our own mums and dads might not actually appreciate this? And we're going to be in a region where they speak a language we don't yet speak well, and for a vague hope of trying to help young people navigate this world. And we've got to find friends, and we don't know how to do 20 other things. And so, well, it was kind of like, okay, we know this is daunting. We had an idea in mind as to, as Shanna said, an integrated curriculum. We knew we could sort of win there. We knew that that wasn't possible at regular universities. We wanted a community experience, a healthy campus. We wanted to tackle the loneliness. We wanted to make help, youngsters sort of find their autonomy, become independent critical thinkers. So we had that in mind. I think you find friends, right? So I don't know when I contacted you to be one of the mentors, but I think you were one of the first, and Benno and several others. So you sort of gather your friends, and we found friends in the Netherlands, and we decided to go indeed to northeast Belgium, where the castles are plenty and relatively cheap. And okay, there are some problems. You have to renovate. You have to learn how to speak French and get on with the neighbors, and sort of work out how to work with volunteers, because we only had so much money. Fortunately, our kids have all sort of left the home, so they no longer were dependent. And in fact, they started to help. So Robert has been a huge help. Our eldest son, he became the foreman and also involved in the pedagogy of the entire project. And then you basically start without fully knowing what you're doing, right? Because it's impossible to plan every detail beforehand. It just can't be done that way. So you throw yourself in. You have open days. You teach a little bit what you've done before, but then you team up with other teachers and you blend it together. You make it integrated. So we found health experts. We found experts on propaganda. We found experts on becoming a critical thinker, right? Cheered, David, Piers, Gigi, many others. Um, and then you create a week experience. And after the week experience, which then goes well, you say, okay, we're now going to trial a 3-month program. So we've trialed twice a 3-month program. The first one was very much oriented towards truly building the curriculum. We had a reasonable idea in mind, as you know, because we've sort of
Mm,
tried to co-develop possible curricula. What, over 10 years ago, Cameron? So,
mm.
we had in our mind's eye some idea of what we were going to do, but to actually do it, to go from the thousands of slides you've got somewhere in the drawer with other people's thousands of slides to an actual curriculum that works together. Ooh, okay. You sit in on each other's classes, you talk about it, you get criticized, you criticize, then okay, we're going to improve the pedagogy, you start to write the textbook, you put in cartoons,
Wow.
you put in jokes, you do afternoon things, you have cases, it's all very exciting. And of course, there's lots of drama involved in that. But that worked surprisingly well, the first pilot. We were very lucky with the 5 people who joined us for that curriculum. These were people who did very well in high school, sort of very academically gifted. So also very mentally stable. So in that sense, pristine environment to basically actually do a new curriculum and co-develop it with the students. And of course, whilst we had 5 regular students, there were like 15 others running around because there were volunteers, international volunteers. And many of them also followed the lectures, and as did quite a few of the teachers and others associated. So the classes were usually, maybe 10 people in the class, but the 5 regulars would sort of form the heart of it. And that allowed us to test drive everything.
And
Um,
so,
and
what?
okay, you go from 3 months, you do the curriculum. Then we did another pilot where Sienna showed up, and that was more the community pilot. Okay, can we actually form a vibrant community where we have more diverse people? Which is a difficult undertaking. I mean, academics are not the best at community living or community organizing. And now suddenly we were sort of in the heart of trying to do that as well. And Sienna and Robert and others sort of started to take the lead on that more and more because it was more what they were good at. And so, also the whole experience started to really gel together. And we started to tackle problems like sensitivity, immaturity in everyone, how to talk to each other. We sort of worked through problems, including diets. We basically experienced a lot of challenges, but in other places, like at university, regular universities now, they look at these challenges and they run away from them. If anybody is sensitive, their solution is nobody talks about it. If people are addicted to their mobile phones, their solution is, well, maybe not a mobile phone in a lecture, but we're not going to help you get sort of over
Hmm.
those kind of things. Atomization, people are lonely, not our problem, right? These things used to be our problem as teachers and academics. They're no longer. And so we were in a unique position that we could sort of try and address these things. Okay, how do you forge a good community? How do people start to cooperate more and more together and make it very academic at the same time? That was very exciting. So,
So,
we then wrote up the textbook. We've now written up the book of our experiences and what it's like and what the next steps are.
so let me. I appreciate all like challenges and having read the book, it all resonates with me. But let me ask from an outsider, what do you teach? Like Sienna's got a psychology degree or a social work degree or a creative writing degree. What do I get at Academia Libera Mentis? How do you describe what this, because that's sort of the currency of education, right? These labels we put. How would you label the content? Because it seems you've got this intellectual content and skills and concepts, and I want to talk about how you approach that in more detail. But then you've also got this sort of building a human, dealing with your addiction, negotiating, living together, diet. I know you've got strong views about social media addiction and the attention spans. So what's the label? Are there different labels? If I said to someone, oh, I'm going to ALM, Academia Libera Mentis, for a degree, what's the?
Well, you become a self-thinker. Right.
That's
So the alumni we've had, the people who've gone through our first one, what they said months after is, okay, now I finally have a view myself on how everything works, and I'm still working on it. Right. But I didn't realize I didn't actually have a view of how society works, organizations, or even themselves worked.
mm,
So they really started to take ownership of what they thought about everything. And well, you don't in 3 months, figure out the entire world and then you're sort of done and can do any challenge. It doesn't work that way. It's more that you are activated, you're made aware, but also you're fed enough that you become reasonable at statistics, you become reasonable at economics, at leadership, management, propaganda, marketing, writing, debating, uh, history, anthropology, psychology, neuroscience. We have a huge breadth in there, but we weave it together because it's
mm,
basically always the same topic, which is humans and what they do.
mm,
And so anything you learn in psychology should also inform you about what happened in history. It should inform you what happens in the boardroom. It should inform you about what happens in industry or in international relations. And that's not the way it's taught anywhere at the moment, but it is how we talk, right? So we integrate absolutely everything.
So can
And
I ask then,
yeah.
Paul? So I think you and I are similar on this, that our there's some kind of motivation deep in ourselves to build up this view of how does the world work? Why is that like that? Like how if and you sort of build it up and some new information comes in, and if it doesn't integrate, you're like, okay, how can they think so strongly that if it doesn't integrate? And you've got to sort of shape the edge and go, maybe that inside is more like this. It's not fully, a complete worldview, but I can integrate it if I reshape this connection. I think we're like-minded, and that's my approach. Sienna, did you experience this? Did you find that you were studying at university without a sort of coherent view of, why do we do this? Why do trade deals happen? Why do people self-sabotage? You know, why do
Mm.
men, go to the gym to if women say they don't like it, and whatever these things are, were you trying to integrate it, or do you, yeah, what's your
Look,
perspective?
yeah, it's a good question. I was somewhat lucky in the sense that because of my family connections, a lot of the content that ALM, and I've expressed this to Paul in the past, a lot of the content that ALM teaches was not new to me because I mean, he developed a lot of it in conjunction with my mother. So I had naturally been exposed to a lot of that kind of thinking before. Um,
Mm,
Now, I mean, if then I'm thinking, like, of course, there's still it's an ongoing process that you're going to learn new things and adapt them into the way that you already think about the world. That's undoubtedly true. And I think the integration does help with that process. It speeds it along in a sense. If I'm to think about how like my peers would probably have responded to that question,
mm,
or yeah, I suppose I can try and channel that, but I think it would probably be because of the kind of non-transferability of the knowledge that you get in most mainstream universities now. I think that's more of a problem. You are thinking about things with a very certain lens, but not thinking about how like causality, the consequences of certain things. I mean, I had this conversation with one of my peers about capitalism, actually, which is like, I think this is was one of the topics in one of my social work courses. And this girl that I was talking to in the seminar was like, basically, it's bad because it, is oppressive and all this kind of stuff. And I'm kind of like, well, you can also look at it like the capitalist countries in the modern day have a significantly higher standard of living than they did, whatever, before these systems were introduced. And this is something that she just never considered before. It's like she had thought about this as like, okay, this is a thing that I'm not even going to look at how it affects, well, sort of um how it's developed in the modern world, what its manifestations are, what its consequences are. Not even really like why it has developed in this particular way. It's just kind of like this is sort of my isolated, atomized understanding of this
mm.
concept. This is the way that I've been taught, and I'm not going to think about it anymore. And this was like a huge eye opener. Like I didn't even really go into it that much. I was just kind of like, had you considered maybe this? And this was huge for her. So I like, yeah, I don't know. I would have to say probably that is a problem that
Yeah,
I've observed. But again, yeah, I've not talked to many people my own age in depth because it's kind of exhausting to do so.
yeah. No, I
Not to
totally
sound.
understand. Yeah. Look, I've had those conversations where people are really, they've built an identity around a bad word or a good word. And you
Hmm.
ask the most trivial thing about some context or some history or something, and you can just see this explosion of no, does not compute, rather than this, oh, gee, that seems important. I'm going to have to integrate that somehow,
Hmm.
because right now it's conflicting. There's alarm bells going off. Yeah, I've noticed that too in many cases. Um, and yeah, so I want to then maybe we should dig in. Maybe I want to talk about the campus experience and who should be interested. But one of the things you wrote in your book, Paul, about the teaching is this idea of anchors. Anchors are like these heavy concepts of which hold a lot of things together and distill them down. And maybe this quote, I'm going to quote from your book as a bit of background, and then I'll let you sort of weave together the approach, and I'd love some examples. So here's a quote from Minds That Dare by Paul Frieders and Sienna Baker. What is now taught at primary schools was either unknown to most humans for most of history, like much of what we now know about biology and the stars, or considered cutting edge knowledge until quite recently. Think about genes and rockets, but also mathematics. Primary school knowledge is not simple at all, but merely knowledge of diverse fields boiled down as much as possible to the essentials in such a way that one easily sees the great relevance of what is taught. That task of helping students get insights from across fields and walk them through their broad relevance is best done by a single teacher. Now, end quote, I've taken that out of context, but I like, it was a little bit shocking to me. I had to integrate this into my worldview. What do you mean? You're telling me that primary school is not basic? But when you've explained it, the fact that my kids know about genes and biology and so many things is quite mind blowing. How does that inform this anchors approach to teaching at ALM, Paul?
It's a big question. But the anchors are indeed these kind of nuggets of knowledge taken at the moment, you might say, from the various tribes that look at the academic tribes that look at humanity. So we take key nuggets of thinking from anthropology, history, psychology, that kind of thing. But let me give two anchors, as it were,
Yeah.
right? One which we don't teach because you already learn at the primary school, and then one which we do teach, and which makes you think, hopefully, very differently about a lot of things. So one of the things they have at primary school is, a globe, that kind of ball thing, right? This is our Earth, and you can say, okay, this is the Earth. We sort of walk on it, and we don't fall off, right? So something pulls at us, and sort of, okay, there's gravity holding us there. Um, but you can spend a whole day, and this is what we would do at ALM, a whole day going through a lot of the implications that you just can realize if you reflect on this ball, right? Okay, that is what the Earth is as a planet. To name a few, well, if you're equally far from the equator, then probably your climate is going to be pretty similar. So you can look on the globe. Oh, what will the climate be like in Canada? Oh, it's rather northerly. It'll be cold, right? And the south, oh, that's different. You can say, okay, well, what about the time zones? What will that be? And if we look at unusual knowledge, how do you get somewhere? Can you just get from mainland Europe to England without swimming? No, you can't, right? But you can get to, let's say, China. Now, why is that relevant? Well, a plant can't swim well, but animals, many animals can't swim well. So there's lots of animals which will have traveled up and down these areas, which won't have made it to Britain, at least, not unless there was a land bridge. And that kind of thing, you could sort of, okay, where would the armies have gone? Where would they have stopped? Who would have influenced whom? You can look at a globe and sort of predict so much about history, right? And predict so much about, okay, where would the harbors be? Where would people make food? What looks like fertile on this globe to you? Where are the river systems? Where would they fish? And so you can sort of, but without explaining anything about cities and countries, said, okay, where do you think most people will live if you just look at how green it is and how low and that sort of thing? And that is hence, you can spend a whole day on that and an enormous amount of insights, which much of it wouldn't have been known by 99% of humanity 200 years ago. Who knew it was a ball? Who knew how to get somewhere? Who knew about the time zones and that? This was niche knowledge. It was very specialized, and people were hanging on to it because, of course, if you knew how to sail
Mm.
somewhere and make good business deals, well, you didn't want your competitors to know. So, these maps were kept secret, right? And that was sort of, secret knowledge. So that's a good idea of an integrated anchor, which you are taught at primary school, which seems simple, but by Jove, right? There's an enormous amount of implications just from that. And that's also how we sort of think about the anchors at ALM, but then the anchors to do with how whole organizations work, how inner psychology works. So I'll give you one example, which is of course from the book, right? We call it the use it or lose it example, and you've already mentioned it, which is that,
Mm.
well, if you want to have muscles, you got to train your muscles, right? What happens if you don't train your muscles for months on end? They atrophy. I mean, you literally lose them. The same is true for bones. You don't use your bones. Well, for instance, if you're sent to a space station, you lose bone mass and you lose quite a bit of it, right? This is a problem. If these astronauts come back, their bones are brittle. The same is true for memory, right? The same is true for sort of walking, right? We lose that ability. Okay, let's think first of bodily implications. So you got to remain fit. Well, how do you know that you let's say are not fit enough? Well, you're quickly out of breath if you do something. Your body gives you information. So what do you do to improve? You use it more. When do you know you've used it too much? Well, when you start to hurt, right? When you start to get little ailments, right? The muscles start to ache, but at a certain moment, you really start to hurt. You tear a muscle, and that's your body telling you, okay, you've done too much. So you also start to get this notion that your body is kind of like a feedback machine. It tells you, okay, this is too much, this is too little. You got to start listening to it, and that is a use it or lose it thing as well. It's kind of a dynamic process. Now then, let's get to some nastier implications, right? What about our immune system, our ability to fight off viruses, cancers? Because we have hundreds of cancers every day in our body, and we clean it up. Well, the immune system needs a workout.
Mm.
Right. It needs a workout, a regular workout, not too much. Like with the muscles, you don't want to tear the muscles too much, but it needs a workout. So that means you shouldn't be in a completely clean space. That is extremely unhealthy. You shouldn't be too afraid of, a cold coming by. That is your immune system getting its update. And of course, what improves an immune system, we know this. It's sort of healthy living, good diet, but also good social relations. That improves your immune system. So one of the best cancer cures is probably just to be happy around other people, because then your immune system is better and it cleans up the cancer. It doesn't come from a pill, right? And of course, some cancers, once they are developed, yes, you do want chemotherapy. That does work. But this is an entirely different way of looking at health from the way that the health system wants to look at it, because they want to make money out of it. They want to say, you've got a problem for which I am the solution. No, you've got a problem for which your immune system is the solution. And the investments in your immune system are that use it or lose it. You've not been sick enough 10 years ago, which is why now, you haven't got a good immune system, that kind of thing. So you look very differently as hospitals. You look very differently at all kinds of other places in the health system, that they are not the solution, because you got to use your immune system to make better. Now, let's then get to really big implications of this kind of use it or lose it thing. Would the same be true for a bureaucracy in an army? Would the
Mm.
Australian army become atrophied and sort of useless if it's not regularly trained? What is enough
Mm.
training? That's a
Mm.
nasty question, isn't it? And
And
who are we
what's
going to
too
train
much,
on?
right? You don't want to accidentally kill half your army because you're training them too hard in too real a scenario. So,
Exactly.
but yeah, I mean,
But you can see how
it,
a simple concept, you can take a whole day trying to work through the implication. Also see, where in the world are we not listening to this? Well, most of our bureaucratic systems presume total control and let's not have any risks. Well, suppose you have a fire department and there's never a fire. Do you think they'll become bad at dealing with big fires?
Mm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they got to be trained, right? So how many small fires does a fire department need in a city? And also real ones that they've got to go out. What is too little fires in a city? That's a
Mm.
nasty question, isn't it? But it's a real one, right? This is how systems actually stay fit, by being used. And too much, well, then half your city is in fire. Too little, when the big fire comes, you don't know what to do. Hmm.
So it's interesting
So it
because
also makes you think of whole
mm,
systems, and then it's not good to be without problems, right? You sort of need a steady flow of problems and challenges for every system that you want to keep fit.
yeah, I guess marriages can be like that too. Anyway, so that's a side note. I'm just thinking, where else you've talked about you need problems. I'm like, what
I just
context
had
should I
that
think?
thought as well.
You did,
Had
okay.
the same thought.
Yeah.
But it's quite interesting, right? Because firstly, it's what would you call it? Folk knowledge that kids should play in the dirt, right? But I still see a real aversion. Um, we had kids young, and so we didn't care, right? We weren't fussy. I think the younger you are as parents, the less you care when the kids are little about those things. But we observe a lot of friends' kids. Yeah, there's a real like sensitivity about that, and I don't know where it comes from. But another big one is allergies, food allergies in kids, and I've just heard um, in the news this week that peanut allergies in US schools are below a certain amount for the first time in 10 years. And apparently that's because the Pediatric Society had this recommendation of avoiding peanuts from like 2000 to 2015. And then, based on some erroneous sort of academic paper, and then it took, nearly 2 decades to turn around and go, actually, you just start with small doses and the body learns to process all these variety of, whatever the molecule is in peanut that you're sensitive to. You build up your muscle, your digestive muscles and so we sort of forgot that knowledge, had a huge period, 20 years of allergies, and now it's sort of returned. Are there other examples where we've sort of forgotten that are easy to relate to this anchor, do you think? Sienna, do you see any? I mean, I think one of them is probably having conversations with people you disagree with. Like if you don't do it, you get really bad at it. And if you do it, you build up this intellectual skill. Would you say that's part of the ALM philosophy to do that?
I'd say for sure. The question was directed to, but yeah, I mean for sure. A disagreement is interesting and I would say generally welcome,
So
which I think is
since I've got you, Sienna, yeah, what were there any anchors that you were like, oh, actually, that's really interesting. Oh, wow, that's really integrating in my worldview. That's quite powerful. That's not use it or lose it. That you,
yeah, I mean sure. Let's see if I can remember. They all had very specific names, and I'm remembering more like the context in which they were taught. So I may not remember the names. I was trying to think of like, I mean, I suppose the while I have less personal interest in leadership, I did find the kind of the ones about leadership to be interesting for sure. Um, the kind of like things such as benevolent rule setting, things like well, like that, I remember the name for that one. But sort of yeah, the tricks I suppose that leaders use in order to um, yeah, organize large groups of people well, I would say, were quite interesting. The one that I often think about when I'm thinking about my own job now is sort of that you've got to keep the people busy. You can't have someone doing nothing, which is quite a intuitive, I guess, thing. But until I had sort of reflected on my own job, I kind of now wonder when my boss is just keeping me busy with stuff and he doesn't actually need me to do things. So I work as a tutor, but I write resources for high school kids. And my boss has recently been getting me to redo a bunch of resources. And in fairness, they do need redoing because we have a bunch of new stuff to add to them. But it did come into my head. I was like, to what extent is he just keeping me busy because he has nothing else to give me at the moment? So yeah, things like that. Particularly the leadership-oriented ones, they were typically the ones that I talked about less with my parents. And which were then therefore new to me in the
mm,
actual classes.
mm.
But yeah, by and large, I did find a lot of them quite interesting. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. So, you've got me thinking about, should I just keep my kids busy? Should I give my wife like, oh, make lots of suggestions? Keep like see, I guess that's the power, right? You start with this insight, you see consequences, and then your mind just runs through everything it
Exactly.
knows. Like, how do I
Mhm.
integrate this? Oh my goodness. Oh, is that why that happened? I appreciate that type of approach, and I guess maybe my brain's wired similarly. But before we get into the, how do students find you? What does it cost? What do you do? Maybe we can tick off the what's a day look like? What's what's the value of the non-intellectual sort of technical skill building part of ALM? What's the value of living in the castle and dealing with people and debating about diets and what you're going to do? Maybe while I've got you, Sienna, did, did did you find that a new experience? I mean, you sort of mentioned you already understood a lot of the ideas from your mum and conversations with Paul in the past, but was the experience of dealing with all these people with different backgrounds, getting off social media? I don't know what the phone policies tell me that. I'll adopt it at my house. What's that experience
Yeah.
like? And did you get some value from it before I get Paul's sort of design intention? We'll get the outcome first and see if it matches.
Yeah, it's a massive question because there's so much that goes into that non like academic content, I suppose, part of the program. One, you have like you started off by asking what a day looks like, so I guess I'll run you through that. I mean, I personally would often work during the morning because of the time zones with my students, but that would be when the academic classes were held, or like half of them basically were held, and then the afternoon, and also when the volunteers were given their tasks. So they would vote on what they wanted to do the previous week, and then Robert would give them the tasks each day based on what they wanted to do, and what was useful for the castle and what we needed to have done. And they would do their 4 hours in the morning. And then there was communal eating. You just fixed your own breakfast in the morning, basically. Communal eating, lunch, and dinner. And then in the afternoon, there was the aesthetic program. And this went through a lot of evolutions, honestly. When I was first joining as sort of a related member, but not really integrated yet, like when I first visited the castle in August and then again in October, there were there was music, there was dancing, but it was a little bit less structured, I suppose. Or there were, yeah, I guess it was just based on who was available to teach those classes. So sometimes we have a lot of people who wanted to like Lodewijk, Astrid, those kinds of people who were happened to be there at the time. Other times there would kind of be a little bit of a spot that was empty. Um, and when we came back, me and Robert, that is, from Australia in June, primarily him, started organizing the aesthetic program. Those gaps in the program were filled by volunteers and students who had particular things they wanted to teach or they wanted to do. So and you get so many people coming in who have their own interests and their own skills. So that ended up being something that really worked out quite well. Not only because you kind of integrate the students, the volunteers into the community as teachers, and you kind of show that, okay, we're interested in the skills that you can bring. There were people who brought along different styles of dance that they had training in, martial arts, like meditation, breathing lessons, I guess, sort of in the sort of meditation arena. But a whole bunch of stuff that you just wouldn't, that sort of aesthetic in nature, that helped bond the community and also helped show the younger people there that what they offered was useful and interesting well, yeah, I mean, the academics could of course join, so to everyone. So that was really nice. I think that worked very well. Um, to address, I think, other implicit questions, I forget exactly what you asked in your question, but I guess, yeah, the experience in general, I definitely got value out of it. It was I wasn't I'm not I'm not used to living in a community. I also don't want to be like I don't want to seem like I'm kind of above it and above interacting with people my own age because I think sometimes I come across like that and I can alienate people. There is a part of me that feels that way sometimes, but it's really not particularly big part of me. But I am sort of more introverted as a person. I don't love being in groups. So it was definitely something to get used to. It was useful to know what parts of it I didn't like and didn't want to experience again, I suppose. And it was also useful to have to orient myself in a groupish way, which was unusual to me, and I think unusual to a lot of people that came through. You kind of have to orient yourself in a way that uh, that makes you dependent on other people in a way that most people aren't used to. Like, if I was living alone or with a partner basically for a few years before I came to the castle, and now again I'm just living with Robert here, but you kind of like when I was living alone, your stove breaks and like you tell the landlord and somebody comes in to fix it and that's fine. And that sort of like was the orientation that I was living in, and that was what self-sufficiency was to me. Sort of, okay, I can figure all this out, but I'm on my own basically. If I can't fix it, I'll pay somebody else to fix it, or my landlord will. Um, but in the castle environment, it's kind of like you almost have to orient yourself first to be like, is there anybody in the community who has the skills to fix this problem or to offer their whatever they have to offer? And more often than not, the answer is yes. So it's a really interesting kind of at least for me, this was interesting because I just wasn't used to living that way and having to depend on others in that way. In some ways, it's quite nice, but in other ways, it's sort of uh, you know, it can be a little bit I suppose uncertain where the boundaries are between, okay, if you provide something, I feel the need to reciprocate, but maybe my skills aren't what the community needs at the moment. So there are all these little kind of things to negotiate as well that make the experience difficult for someone who's not used to living
Mhm.
like that. Um, I could go on about this, to be honest.
No, it's interesting. I mean, it sounds like that was a big life lesson for you, coming from your background into that communal environment, whereas the academic ideas, you were familiar with, but not so much the social environment and the degree of bargaining I think that goes on in human groups when we live in close quarters. So I'll pass it over
Yeah.
to Paul. Then what? That's Sienna's experience. What's your intention from being in the castle and being away? Like, why can't you teach with these anchors and integrated curriculum, um, online on Zoom with a Wednesday night 2 hour session? Where's the value, or what are you trying? What value are you trying to provide with the in-person communal living aesthetic program, which sounds like a lot of fun? Yeah, what's the intention there? Think of me as a
I
parent
guess
or a student who's
yeah, yeah.
getting curious now.
I think I think that Sienna has sort of already perfectly worded it, right? Which is that you really are in a community where you're trying to work out things together. And what is taught in the academic program often is immediately useful in how to do a community, right? So, for instance, the leadership lessons, how to run a meeting, how to plan things, but also indeed, yeah, um, how to spin a story that combines us, right? How to spin a joint history. Well, you teach that in the morning, let's say on a Tuesday, and by Friday, some people in the community will have spun a story as to the history of ALM, the history of volunteers, and makes a bonding exercise out of it, and sort of okay, a case study. And so you get to experience the value or not of all this integrated curriculum. So to a certain extent, there's an immediate proof in the pudding. Does this really work with a community? Well, we've got a community. Let's experiment on ourselves. And as Sienna said, the same was true for organizing the volunteers into communal activities. And she describes perfectly how, to a certain extent, because people do so much for each other and depend on each other, that there's an interesting dynamic that then occurs that people start looking for things to do. They stop, as it were, playing the victim and sort of, oh, I've got a problem, come help me. They also start to think and sort of, oh, I want to roll too.
Mm,
I don't want to be the person who's got nothing to offer. And what I'm really good at is well, maybe some skill that nobody is waiting for at this moment. Maybe that's in the in their real life they build roads or something like that, but I will find a role, right? And so you also hence get that the community as a whole starts to work together because people try to look for roles, slot into them, and help each other slot into them.
Mm.
Um, and that is something you can't do online because you haven't got other people to do this with, right? You
Mm.
can't experiment on a different community because you haven't got one if you're behind your computer in a basement, right? And so the material gets integrated in a real time sense, right? And then vetted and experienced, right? And that was very much something we aimed for, and that is impossible, right?
Mm.
Now, as Sienna already said, and we touched upon this earlier, the ability to function as a group is something that is totally natural to humans, but in our societies, we've lost a lot of that, right? I think Australia is still relatively good at communities relative to many other countries, but people live so separate, so atomized that this whole experience of, yeah, how do you function with 30 other people is sort of like unknown territory now for many people. And they've lost, well, they've not practiced those muscles, and it takes a while to build them up. Um,
Yeah.
Now, if we then, if I put on my academic hat, right, of course, as we wanted to help people become self-thinkers and sort of become in charge of their own learning, which also means you learn how to learn, you learn how to self-reflect, you learn how to forgive yourself, you learn how to forgive others, you sort of learn how to communicate. We practice conversations, but also the higher stuff. We do statistics, right? We do economics. We learn about whole health systems, whole democracies. But there again, let's take two examples, right? Participatory democracy, referendum, voting on things. The castle, we voted on our own diet. And we planned how to vote on our own diet. And then, well, we ate that diet for the next month. So once again, right, this wasn't just esoteric and sort of vague. No, no. You think you can figure out a better way to do democracy? We'll do it this week. And we'll take the decision seriously, right? Then that determines what we eat the next month, right?
Brilliant.
And statistics, well, yeah, I mean, statistics lessons at university, right? Here's your data, go run a test on it. That's practically how it's done. Uh, but you don't get into the nitty gritty of just how uncertain data is and what crazy assumptions go into gathering it. How do you make that clear to students? Well, you let them gather their own data. And what better subject than themselves? Because, people are interested in themselves. So we had them measuring their heart rate, right? And so the morning would start with 8 o'clock, the bell goes, and Sienna would be, oh, what's my heart rate? Uh, does that extra beat count or not? Da, 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 da. Oh, I was 15 minutes late. I was supposed to do it at 8. And Sienna was the most conscientious, right? But some others, forgot half the time or 90% of the time, right? And so then you arrive at the statistics class with your own little matrix of heart rate measurements, and you compare it among each other. And you find all kinds of crazy patterns which can't possibly be true. I think that Robert said to one of the others, well, if I would believe your data, then you shouldn't sleep more than 11 hours or your heart will explode because the
Mm.
more that other person slept, the higher the heart rate. So, right? And so then statistics starts to be real, right? And also the problems with statistics start to be real, right? Because you've experienced the difficulties of it and all the subjectivity in gathering it and all the ways you can cheat or just not gather it at all and then make it up, which happens as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, that's right. Exactly. So I want to sort of bring it all to a close. I feel like we need a label. I'm getting a degree in something at ALM. I need some powerful words there. It sounds like a self-thinker, an integrated thinker. I'll get my thesaurus out after our conversation, because I want to use this word to describe it as I talk about it. What I want you to sort of pitch, how to get involved, where to find you, what sort of students you've had that would be interested. But before we get to that final pitch, what has turned out differently from what you imagined? One thing each, maybe, that you could I know, Paul, you talked about this vision for a long time. We've got to do this better. Someone's got to do it. I guess it's going to be me taking the risk, doing the experiment, going on the adventure. And then you start doing it, and then you're like, this is exactly the opposite. And then you integrate that in your worldview. Um, what's turned out really differently from what you envisioned, and maybe even surprised you about the students, the coordination, there's some interesting stories in the book. I'll share the one that stood out for me that was unexpected, even though I known you for a long time at the end. But what's the first one? Start with Paul.
Um, ooh, many things turn out differently, right? Um, what what was surprising? Uh, I mean, one thing I hoped for, but uh, happened more even than I anticipated, was how nice it is as a group of teachers to actually talk to each other as human beings and to take each other seriously and what our knowledge was, right? Because I'd come from a world in which it was always everybody's brilliant, but everybody disagrees with everybody, right? And then everybody's in their own little bubble as an academic. I'm brilliant and you're wrong. No, no, I'm brilliant and you're wrong, right? And how stale that is and dull. And it was very nice to have an academic group of teachers who then become friends who sit in on each other classes not to score points, but to help each other and learn from each other at the same time. And once you get that going, that is so nice. It's kind of like it's almost like you're co-parents, but then not just with one parent, but with five or six others, right? And that was a very unexpectedly easy. That was unexpectedly easy. I expected that would take months to sort of set up, but no, that was within hours, right? It was kind of like, oh, this is great. Yes, we should do this. We should teach like this. And that was very nice. Yeah.
Oh,
And of
well,
course, the challenges. Oh my God, right? I mean, it's living together as a community of tough. I learned so much about myself and others.
yeah, there's a lot of self-reflection in the book from both of you, which is actually hilarious. I hope it's just as funny for others who don't know you. What turned out differently to what you had in mind or imagined from attending the Castle, Sienna?
I mean, like, honestly, the thing that occurs to me most is just like I didn't expect to be so involved. It's like when I first came to the castle, it was kind of like, well, I'll be here for a week and I'll, do my best and I'll go back to Australia. And I did not expect to, well, like move my entire life here and be so involved. And it's been really nice. But yeah, I like that's because I didn't have many other expectations. I didn't know what to expect other than that. Other than that I do some kind of teaching in the first week and then that would be that. So I didn't really have expectations to that could be dashed or that could be, whatever, surprised. It was other than that. Other than, I didn't expect to be doing a bunch of the admin and then to have attended, huge sways of the program and all of these kinds of things. So really the whole thing, I guess.
Turned out unexpectedly. Um, so who should attend? And uh, I'm an academic. I love learning stuff, but I think maybe young adults there's more of a what do I get type of attitude than I want to commit to just, it's almost working on myself, it's almost part of the self-help um, sort of industry in some ways. Like I want to go and learn how to live with people and integrate a worldview and learn, but I don't get to become like I'm a qualified whatever. So who should come along? How can you get involved? How much does it cost? When's your next course? Sell me next year's course. If there's a potential student, parent, or many out there listening who'd like to move to Belgium for a year and have this experience. Paul?
Shall I? Yes. So
Yeah.
we have a 3 month program, June, July, August next year, and we have a 12-month program then starting in September next year. Who would our ideal student look like? Curious, ambitious, smart, and wanting to help their society as well. We really do want those people who sort of feel that their society has problems and they want to be part of the solutions. They want to lead the solutions. And the more ambitious, the better. You know, they want to improve their democracy. Great. You'll learn a lot about democratic systems and you'll get to implement the ideas you come to immediately. You want to think about a new health system? Great. You want to think about a new education system? Great. You want to think about a new property market system? Great. Right. Write a book about it. And so that kind of, ambitious, a little bit reform-minded person who wants to take ownership of themselves and into the future, and yeah, is also eager to experience the community thing, to make lifelong friends, hopefully, with which to do these things or to marry them, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and so that's also the kind of parent, right? We're not just talking to the kind of students at Academia Libera Mentis. But we're also thinking of the kind of parent who wants to save their young adult from, a life of sort of atomistic boredom, and wants to, yeah, equip them, if you like, with an improved immune system for the nonsense and the propaganda that is so rife in our societies, and yeah, make them self-aware, help them become even more self-aware, and we call this architects of the future, right? Including of their own. But that is what they want for their young adults. They don't want them to sort of, become a compliant little cog who is not ready for real challenges. And if society changes majorly, or if AI makes society change majorly, they're lost, right? No, these are them people who will say, okay, I'll figure this out, and with others, as Sienna said, right? I'm not on my own. People can actually help each other. So those are the kind of people we want. How? Well, we've got a website, liberamentis.org. But check out our stories on liberamentis.substack.com. And of course, we've just co-written a book called Minds That Dare, which will be available soon, and we have a pre-order website for everybody who's interested in that. And that is where you can read about our adventures, more about the philosophy, how the curriculum works, how the day things, our struggles, what we learned, and hence also what you'll get out of it. Um, and as to cost, well, it's cheaper than it is for people to study in Australia, right? For foreigners to study at universities and degree in Australia. So in that sense, we're very competitive.
Mm.
And you get a castle in Belgium.
So, and is this like it's like if I'm just thinking, my eldest son Eli's just finished high school. Um, is he a curious guy? He is a hardworking guy, and he's my son, so I'm sure he's curious uh, about some things. But so this is like a room board tuition package for 3 months, June, July, August 2026. Do you need a visa from Australia for that period of time in Belgium? 90 days, okay on a.
Not for 3 months. 3 months, any Australian youngster can come. And also, Australians under 30 have the great advantage that they can come on a visiting working holiday kind of thing for a year. So they can also, it's a reciprocal thing with Belgium. So Australian youngsters can actually come to Belgium for a whole year under fairly easy circumstances, right? We can't offer education visas because we're not in the official system, deliberately, of course.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's actually the visa situation is not that difficult. 3 months, you can just hop on a plane and be here for 3 months.
Great. I might do that. So I'm very inspired at the very least. Having a lot of friends in academia in Australia, I hear lots of frustrations. There's still obviously some very good students and teachers and great stuff that happens, but amongst the mass of mediocrity and mediocrity. Can't even speak. I should have learnt my creative writing a little better. Let's then wrap it up. Sienna, thanks very much for your time. When are you back in the castle next? Are you
Probably in a couple of weeks for some filming and some
brilliant?
uh last little filming for the year.
Paul, thanks very much. I'll put all those links to the Substack, the website, um, everything in the show notes. Your YouTube channel, I think you've got one now, soon to be added to. Are there any final words before we go, or should we just leave it on an inspirational ending?
I would love to see franchises emerge in Australia itself, right? I think that would be great. And I also think that there's a huge hunger in Australia for something like that, right? There's, as you know, there are many people who believe that there's a lot of problems now in Australia. It's too authoritarian, too corrupt in many ways. And also, yeah, atomized, right? It's becoming more and more lonely, more and more difficulties. And so why not, right? Something in Sydney, something in Brisbane, maybe more than one franchise.
Yeah, not many castles to choose from around here. It'll have to be an old farmhouse, but
Australia's got other wonderful things.
we'll talk
You've
about
got
that.
beaches.
Well, we'll make sure we definitely have to make sure there's somewhere to swim nearby. That's for sure. All right, let's wrap it up. Thanks very much, Paul. Thanks, Sienna.
Thank you.